Okay, so we're going to stick with me, starting the 4-step process. So in step 1, initiate the Section 106 process. Sounds pretty obvious, doesn't it? The participants, though, in the Section 106 process, basically you have to talk to a bunch of people. And these would be your participants, all federal agencies that are, we have, when MoDOT is going across Forest Service land, you have 2 federal agencies. You can have multiple federal agencies involved in a project. The Advisory Council on Historic Preservation is always involved. Consulting parties are the SHPO, so my office, the Tribal Historic Preservation Offices, so the TIPO, any federally recognized Indian tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations, local governments or CLGs, the NHLs, so the National Park Service, if there's an NHL in the project area, the applicant, the person actually wanting to do the project, whether that be the federal agency or someone applying to the federal agency, any other interested parties. So there's sometimes in local groups that for one reason or another, if there's a friends of a building type of situation or friends of a park, those are actually groups, and so they can also be a consulting party or an interested party. And the public, the process does require that the public be notified throughout the process for consultation, although certain information is asked to be kept from the public with regards to sorry, got distracted by the chat. Throughout the process. So those are your consulting parties. They vary from person to person. You have to identify which tribes are interested in consulting based on where your project is located. We usually direct people to the MoDOT website, but that will be handled under consultation later. We'll talk about that more. But other federal agencies. So since more than one federal agency can be involved, there is the option of having what's called a lead federal agency. And a lead federal agency is someone who all the other federal agencies involved say, yes, we are going to have this federal agency be in charge of compliance with the Section 106 process. They can also, they don't all have to unanimously decide that. If 2 or 3 of them are say this agency is lead fed and one agency prefers to handle their own compliance, then they can surely do that. The other thing is that the agency being designated as lead federal agency has to agree to be lead federal agency. I have had it in my career where an agency tried to designate HUD as the lead federal agency without HUD agreeing to be the lead federal agency. And that just doesn't work. So it has to be something that is in an agreement. And usually when it gets to the point of agencies designating a lead federal agency, it usually isn't an agreement document, but they can just send correspondence that establishes that. Consultation is something that we all talk about. We all know what it is deep down, but consultation seeks concurrence on how things are being done, how the historic properties are identified and considered or managed. And it's wanting to discuss and seeking the views of considering the points of view of others and what they have to say. Tribal consultation under the NHPA is mandated to be a government to government relationship. So an applicant cannot go to a tribe on behalf of their project. That is the responsibility of the federal agency. And they cannot delegate that down. The public consultation, we'll discuss more further, but they are also a major player because you have to get out your public consultation to know sometimes who the landowners are. A lot of projects do contact the landowners, but not all of them may get your letter. So SHPO consultation, it initiated early. SHPOs, you can start to informally by contacting us through email or mail. It doesn't replace later formal comment from us, but our job is to help you through the process. So that means if you've hit a point in your Section 106 determinations, if something is an undertaking, what your area of potential effect. At any stage in this process, if you run into a situation where you don't know how to move forward, you can contact the SHPO. So it's never too early to start consultation, and it's never too early to start talking to us about a project. So the role of the federal agency in the Section 106 process is important because we say in shorthand that the federal agency are the ones driving the bus. They are the drivers. The rest of us are just passengers because they're the decision makers. The federal agency is responsible for initiating and completing the Section 106 process. They are required to make a reasonable and good faith effort to identify historic properties. Notice that does not say they are required to locate every historic property, but they are required to make a reasonable and good faith effort. The agency is responsible for determining the level of effort required for a project in consultation with SHPO. Later in the presentation, we'll go over what information SHPO asks for, but ultimately, level of effort is determined by the agency. The agency must conduct government to government consultation with Native American tribes. They are responsible to make determinations of eligibility for sites and buildings and historic properties located. And they are also responsible to make a determination of effect for their projects, which means that they have to make a no adverse effect or no historic properties affected determination. Some of their responsibilities may be delegated to another entity, but not all of them. But final determinations, another entity may be making those, but then it is the decision of the federal agency to delegate those responsibilities. So, and SHPO role, you'll notice it's pretty minor. We are here as someone to consult and comment. We are here as a resource to help them and help anybody trying to work their way through the Section 106 process. And SHPO we have a 30 calendar days from the receipt of complete and adequate information to comment on a project. If SHPO has not received or has to ask for additional information, our 30-day clock restarts. So if we're at day 20 reviewing projects and we get to yours and we need additional information that was not supplied, our clock restarts when we get that additional information. And if we have not received your project, the 30-day time frame for review has not begun. So involving the public in consultation, this can be done through newspapers or public meetings, or I've seen people show up at like a public council meeting type of situation. There are multiple ways to conduct public, I'm sorry, multiple ways to conduct public consultation. It just has to be documented that you did it and shown that you have completed it. SHPO doesn't ask for that information. That is a documentation situation for the feds. But an effort must be made to consult with the public for the effects of a project. So that's the end for me. Are there any questions? I will flip to participants here and see if I see any. Pam Johnston, did you want to come off mute if you have a question? I think Amanda answered the last one.
I have a question. Good
sure,
morning,
go ahead.
Amy. Okay.
Good morning.
So I'm with the Weatherization Department in St. Louis County. When we should send a SHPO request in, you said it takes normally 30 days for it to turn around. So do you qualify the question in 30 days and send it back? Or does it take more time than the 30 days for you to send it back? And my other question is, when you receive it, okay, you said you start that 30, that's when the 30 days start. But when do you consider receiving something? Is it the postmark date? Is it the email date? Or is it when the tech picks it up?
So, if I have this wrong, Amanda, you can correct me. We still request paper copies of everything. So, and with everybody coming out of COVID, we don't, we are asking that the paper copies start coming in again. That means that we go from the day it arrives in our office. So we have someone who processes the mail every single day. And so everything that came in on that day gets stamped. So that's the day that we receive it. If it's been emailed, that doesn't guarantee. We ask for a hard copy, and we need the hard copies, especially on larger documents, because we don't have the funding to be printing, especially if something is 10 to 15 pages of additional information. We don't really have the budget to be printing that. As far as the response, we have been able to turn our response around a lot quicker by, if people provide us their emails, we email a PDF of our letter back, signed, finished copy of our letter to that person. So that is either the day we finish, usually the day after, because we have to put it in for signature, but pretty close. So we don't usually have to count mailing time. So the end of it is quicker than the beginning of it, because we need to get paper copy. Which if any of the applicants need a paper copy, we are more than happy to mail the paper copy to them. But we do offer the email copy as an option. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Can I share with you what we go through?
Sure.
Okay. So when we mail something out, it may take from the time we get it. Okay, I'm an auditor, so let's start there. So I go to a person's home. and I look at their home and I determine they need a door, a window, something like that. And I make out the contract, but then I have to send the work request off to SHPO. Okay, so that's day one. When I send it off through the mail, it's at least 2 to 3 days before you even get it. Okay, now that's not so bad. But the problem is on the back end, and you're saying you're trying to make it up because we have to work within 30 to 90 days because our contractors expect to get paid by that time. And if we have to wait 60 days, 30 days for that, then that's expanding the time that before our contractors are going to get paid. And it's also holding our progress up on our work. So is there a way, or can we off this talk about a way to expedite that?
Hey, Amy, I'll take
Yeah,
this.
I was gonna say,
Um,
Amanda, you were just that.
You might take a look at the chat box, Amy. There's a few questions in there for
Yep.
when you get back. So the federal law allows us 30 days to review and comment on all projects. And that is from the day of receipt. And I know that that seems like a lot of time, but you have to keep in mind that it's just me, Amy, and Jeffrey reviewing these projects. We review over 3,000 projects a year. So, between the three of us, and if there's a project that involves a structure, which usually if you're doing weatherization, it does, I'm the only reviewer completing these reviews. So I'm doing them as fast as I possibly can. So if we get those reviews complete in 30 days, that is considered successful, and that we are complying with the law. So I would just suggest that you go ahead and build in that 30 days into your process. Just know that it is going to be up to 30 days. So I would probably say 33 days because, we have to get it mailed to our office. But we do have your email, and we usually email those back to you. So you get them. We write the letter the next day. You get them usually because they get signed, and we get them out. So I would just build that into your timeline. And we are currently working on a digital system for submission of projects and review of projects that should get rid of that 3 days at the beginning of the project, and also the need to have a paper copy. But it is probably going to be at least the end of the calendar year before that's available. So we're working with our IT to get that, but we know this is something we've been working on a while. We know that this is, an area where we could definitely use improvement. So we're working on that, and hopefully, hopefully we will have that complete by the end of the calendar year, and have a training on how to use that process and what we're going to be doing in that. So unfortunately, that's pretty much the best that we can do at this time.
Thank you, Amanda.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
So this is Amy again. I've been looking at the chat. So Brad Dunnigan, would USACE be the lead federal agency on a city-funded project that requires a 404 permit? Yes. Since it doesn't indicate that the city is getting any other federal funding, the USACE would be the federal agency involved in that project. I see Amanda answered it, but will these slides with comments be available for download, and where? On the website, we don't quite know where, but we can send out a notice when we get that up and running. So Cassie, what was your question? Because I see you have, you can't raise your hand, and clearly that's not quite working. So what was your question, Cassie?
Entirely operator error, and I figured it out, but thank you, Amy. So when you were talking about involving the public in consultation, if, we do a lot of larger projects where we, kind of initially have a public involvement meeting or something like that, does that count if at that time we haven't identified the effects of of the undertaking, or, you know, made an effect determination? Do you understand what I'm asking? Like, do we need to have that available to the public?
No, so really, your public consultation is really determined, and the level to which it's determined is the federal agency. They determine how much and when is required. But yes, your public consultation can take the form of a public meeting. If it's at an earlier stage, then a later stage, that's all up to the federal agency. SHPO doesn't have anything to do with that. We don't monitor the consultation. Though we do attend it, we don't actually monitor any requirements for it.
And I'll add,
Got it. Thank
this
you.
is Amanda, I'll add because I deal a lot more with agreement documents and everything and public participation. So if you're having an adverse effect and we'll talk about agreement documents later, when you're having an adverse effect and you have an agreement document that needs to be developed, we want to make sure that the public notice went out. We're not necessarily saying it had to say that there was going to be an adverse effect, but we need to know like when that happened and if there were any comments received. That will be something you have to document in the MOA itself. So you'll need to know that date and if comments were received. You know, if there's any particular strong comments that you receive from the public or maybe from an organization, you might want to invite them to participate in consultation if we have a meeting to discuss how we're going to resolve adverse effects. And then if we're having adverse effects, then you would want to send out a letter to local historical societies and different agents or groups that might have interest, just as an extra precaution to get that kind of public notice out there. But for almost all of your undertakings, the standard how you do your notice is going to be fine. You know, there's a lot of different ways, and we don't really police that. The ACHP does have some guidance. That's the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. Have some guidance on what a reasonable and good faith effort is as far as public notice and some other items as well. So.
Thank you. So kind of as a summary, if we identify the historic property in the public meeting or the public notice, but it's okay if we haven't yet determined that there's an adverse effect, you know, if we're still in the process of consultation and getting the actual effect figured out, yeah, that would work.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you've identified we're involving these 5 properties in our project, people have had opportunity to comment on those 5 properties, you know, but if you've, you know, if you went out and you just said, hey, we're doing a project, we're not sure what's going to be affected, you know, like we don't know, say we're going to go out and do some demos. We're not really sure which properties it's going to be yet, but do you have any comments? That's a little too early in the process at that point. But after you have identified what those properties are, if people have had the opportunity to comment on those properties, then that's fine.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. So Vernie, I see your question in here twice. What does cleanup have to do with section 106? So because cleanup can range in definition from being picking up surface debris and raking the leaves up to tearing out foundations and overhauling the landscape. Cleanup is a very vague term. It's like general maintenance. It says nothing about what is actually going on or being done, because it means 10 different things to 20 different agencies. And so that's why under 106 and why in the question, if the only thing we are told is that it's cleanup, we have to assume because our job is to take into consideration the effects on historic properties, that it's the worst thing until the agency tells us what they are doing. And we'll get into the definitions and explanations of when you're submitting your project and how you explain your project is very important, but this gives you a precursor. If you just say you're conducting cleanup, what does that mean actually? Are you going to be digging stuff out? Are you going to be destroying something? Are you just going to be picking up the surface debris? And then from Angela Rooker, can you go back and define foreclosure? It sounds like it is when the federal agency does something without consulting SHPO. Yes, that's foreclosure. There's big F and there's little f. Federal agency themselves doing something is a big F. They have literally made the decision. Little f is when an applicant or someone who's coming in later and saying, oh yeah, we did this thing and found out we need a permit. That's a little f. Our time for comment is passed on either case, but because the agency had no control over that individual doing something. But if it's the federal agency themselves, that is a big F and that is a foreclosure. It's listed on the form submitted. Oh. Jacob, I'm going to leave that question. Sewer. No, I'm sorry. I know that there's going to be a lot of people now asking for us to shorten the month, that we have 30 days under the law and we have 30 days under the law for a reason. So I'm going to state that up front. We have that for a reason, and we cannot say, oh, we can get this done in 15, because today we may be able to, but tomorrow we may not. So no, we do not and will not shorten our 30 days.
And also on that, for the 30 days, it's not really fair to somebody who's been waiting 30 days for their project response for something that's a simpler project to jump the queue. So it's really to keep things as fair as possible. You know, we review them as soon as we can in the order in which they're received. The only exemption to that is an emergency, and we'll be explaining what actually constitutes an emergency later. But you know, it really just depends. Some weeks we might be reviewing, you know, at things that we've had for 20 days, and some weeks we might be reviewing things at 30 days, and that's just kind of the reality. And I know that it's frustrating, but just build 30 days in there for your review. And if you get to 30 days and you haven't heard from us, please contact our admin, Chris Tellman, and I can put her email in the chat here in just a second, and she will check the status for you.
Yeah, and we'll provide that later again, I think. So Don Booth asked, what is the consequences for foreclosure, big F or little f? Big F foreclosures go to the ACHP, so they go up to the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. SHPO steps out of basically say,
Amy, you're kind of breaking up right now, and you've gone out. So to bring back, if everybody can hear me, I'll go ahead and discuss this while Amy's getting back up.
can you still hear me? Because you don't need to see
I can
me.
hear you now.
So
no, we
great.
couldn't hear you there for a minute. So you're back now, but if you'd like to continue. Oh, I don't know.
So anyway, foreclosures go through the ACHP. Basically, at that point, we bring in our federal equivalent, which is the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which is an independent agency that reports directly to the president. That
I'm not really sure what's happening with Amy's connection, especially because she's at the SHPO office. But the ACHP reviews foreclosure, and it's kind of an intent thing. So they review the intent to see if there was an intent for foreclosure, and then they make a determination on the project. You're back,
Okay.
Amy.
Am I back?
You
Well,
might
I'm
just
passing
turn
it
off
off
your
to-
camera, and then it
Yeah.
might work a little better for you.
Yeah, well, I'm turning it over to Jeffrey, so.
All right, thank you, Amy. Hopefully our bandwidth will hold. Okay, so Amy has talked to you about the first step of the Section 106 process, which is initiating the Section 106 process. Can you guys hear me? Okay,
Yes, we can hear you.
okay, gotcha. All right, so yes, Amy talked to you guys about the first step of the 106 process, initiating the 106 process. So I'm going to pick it up from there